The non-Jewish community does not understand our fixation, our obsession with Israel.
Good evening, and welcome to the 2018 to the 2016-2019 Taglit Birthright Israel Winter Mega Event, Summer Mega Event, right here in Jerusalem, the eternal capital of our people.
Is there anyone here from the United States of America?
What's your name? Where are you from, brother?
I'm Michael, and I'm from Detroit, Michigan!
Everybody knows somebody who was in the army. Israeli soldiers, they're hot, they're awesome, they're strong, they're everything we could all want to be.
My name is Israel I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I came around Birthright in 2016. I joined the Army 4 months after I finished Birthright. This is my flight back to America, and I'm still in the Army now. Yeah! I'm Israel!
Kol hakavod. That's beautiful.
The first time I've been to the United States, I met so many nice people. Jewish Americans will tell me things like, we like you, but we don't like Palestinians. Even though I'm the only Palestinian they know. Of course, around that time, I would take it personally. But then you come to realize that people do not know. They know nothing about Palestine and Palestinians, or have no idea about what Palestinians are going through.
Coming into Palestine for the first time, I remember asking people, what do you think? Should I do it? And the response that I always got was, you know, you're gonna be killed.
Palestinians in the West Bank, even though their lives are controlled by the state of Israel from morning, noon, and night, are not even theoretically citizens of the country in which they live. You see in some ways what non-democracy looks like up close.
When people look at the West Bank today and say, this is an apartheid system, it's not just throwing out a word. A Palestinian lives under a different legal system than an Israeli settler living next door.
Give me my order.
Anyone who, sees these facts on the grounds or speaks to Palestinians would understand that this is a process of settler colonization, of an apartheid regime.
I remember crossing that checkpoint into Bethlehem, and before this, I had been very much opposed to ever using the word apartheid. But seeing the sort of night and day difference just by crossing this wall changed that for me in an instant.
Serving in the Israeli army is obviously one way of supporting Israel, but there's also another modern battle that is happening on campuses each and every single day, and you are standing in the front of it. And Israeli government, Israeli people thank you for that, and that's why they put me here, probably. And I thank you for that. So
we need PR like you.
There's a lot of PR to be made.
This university, thank God, is fairly apolitical. But I've heard all over the place how universities are these hotbeds of anti-Semitic and anti-Israel work.
I remember very vividly, I was sitting in my dorm room with a friend of mine. We got a phone call that an anti-Israel bill was being introduced in the student government. We bolted. On the way, called our parents. Both got sent talking points. And then we went into this student government meeting.
The Student Senate at the University of California, Berkeley, calling on campus officials to divest from companies that supply weapons that Israel uses in its occupation of the Palestinian territories.
You are siding with the Palestinians on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. There's just no question about it.
I just knew it was this bad thing that I had to fight.
It is anti-Semitism. It is.
You are trying to make me feel marginalized on my own campus.
And I remember all of us going, well, you shouldn't boycott Israel because it's applying a double standard, and you shouldn't boycott Israel because it's unfair to single out Israel.
Please, I beg of you, I beg you, please, to have compassion and to remember that we are alienating students, and I am devastated by this bill. I am a human being.
I still remember you have these Palestinian students who get up and said, you know, Jewish students, you are crying about feeling silenced and marginalized. You know, my aunts and cousins didn't sleep for weeks while bombs were falling overhead in Gaza. What do you have to say to that?
If divestment is hostile, then where do we begin to describe the hostility of a military occupation?
I was thrown into all these conversations where people were throwing around all these words that I'd never heard before. Occupation, settlement, apartheid, ethnic cleansing. I just never heard anyone use any of these terms before. I thought I knew so much about Israel, but I didn't really know what anybody was talking about when they were talking about all these things. I remember coming to Hillel and saying, why aren't we answering Palestinian students' questions? I felt really embarrassed by it because mostly I felt like we weren't doing a good job refuting their arguments. Do we not have an actual counter-argument besides like rockets, double standard, anti-Semitism? I couldn't get an answer from anybody, and that was really disturbing for me. I mean, there are these people called Palestinians who think that Israel wields all this power over their lives and don't have rights, don't have water. Literally, what is this? How is this happening? How do I respond to it?
People that have a problem with Israel, there's a good chance they're misguided in some way or another.
Everyone have the freedom in Israel. Like, you can have any religion. You could do whatever you want in Israel, but only in Israel in the Middle East.
A lot of it's a lot of misinformation.
Some of it comes from misinformation. Some of it comes from ignorance. Some of it comes from lies. And it's very hard to deal with that in any kind of a positive way when they're coming from such a place of not understanding what the reality of the situation. When they just have this in their head, all this misinformation and all these lies. I mean, somehow pro-Palestinian has become pro-social justice.
I wanted to know answers from within my own community, and nobody could answer those questions for me. How is it that I am like the best the Jewish community has to offer? I've been through all the trainings, all the programs, and I don't know what the occupation is. I don't know what the settlements are. Eventually it got to a point where I found myself wanting answers to the questions that Palestinian students were asking. And so it led me on a process of trying to go figure those things out for myself. What is this thing that is so horrifying that you can't bear to let me see it? The summer after my freshman year, I went to Palestine and I knowingly crossed the line for the first time. I don't think I realized the extent to which what I would come to see on the ground would really shock me and horrify me.
So if you look at your maps, we're standing again right before is going to turn red, just over here where the soldiers are standing. So just look behind you guys. This is a block of houses. The people living in all these apartments here were not allowed to walk on this main road. So this was like a red road, a sterilized road, and imagine if you're a family living here, you can't open the front door of your house and walk out.
I'm listening to Palestinian students talking about what it was like being beaten at a checkpoint and sitting down with a Palestinian family and hearing their story about being displaced by Israeli settlers.
And even when we fix the water wells, and we try to cultivate the rainwater to come into the water wells, even those things are being attacked by the settlers. Either they throw stones in them, or they throw chemicals in them, or they throw dead animals in the wells.
So he's saying, first he welcomes you, and says, thank you very much for coming, especially because you're Jewish. The area here is populated by Palestinian farmers. The Supreme Court in Israel ruled that they're allowed to live in the caves that are here. They're not allowed to build anything. Today, the civil administration and the army came and demolished some of the tents here.
Something is deeply wrong here, and it's breaking my heart. What we've been told is that the only way that Jews can be safe is if Palestinians are not safe. And I guess the more I learned about that, the more I came to see that as a lie. So this is the checkpoint that divides Jerusalem from Bethlehem. Palestinians definitely cannot drive on this road. So you can see that we're basically driving with walls on both sides of us right now.
You want to go to like the major square, or where do you want to go?
We're in your head, man.
This is my barber. Very special.
As someone who came to see Jerusalem or Tel Aviv as places that I should imagine as home, I remember coming into the West Bank for the first time and actually seeing this place as someone else's home. This is a normal place where people are just trying to live their lives.
For me to get to Jerusalem, I have to think of, first of all, having the permit, getting to the checkpoint, waiting in lines for the checkpoint, getting to the soldiers at the checkpoint. The soldier might do anything to me at that point, including sending me back, and then crossing the checkpoint, and then having to take public transportation. Just the fact that I cannot drive.
Right.
As a Palestinian, I cannot drive in Jerusalem or anywhere in Israel.
Right. So we drove here today, and
And if I'm not home by 10 p.m. and I get caught on the other side, then I could be detained, I could lose my permit for good, I could be put in prison, I could be beaten up by soldiers. Who knows what will happen to me? Almost any rooftop you stand on in Bethlehem, you look one way or the other, you will see a settlement built around you.
I started coming here in 2010. I heard you speak to a group about anti-Semitism and inherited trauma, and started thinking a lot about what it means to challenge my community around the deep ingrained traumas that are totally stopping us from any sort of movement on this issue.
My first learning experience was when I was invited to go to Auschwitz on a bearing witness retreat. I actually say in Auschwitz I discovered one of the main reasons why this conflict exists today, which is this inherited trauma that exists in the Jewish community, where the feeling is that as Jews we're always attacked, we've always been attacked, we will always be attacked, and therefore the only way to maintain ourselves is to create this very suppressive security mechanism that would prevent this from happening again.
I mean, that's what I learned.
Yeah, that's what I heard. What is important for many of the Israeli Jews and the Jews from around the world we talk to is the simple recognition and acknowledgement of the story. Right. And that story is where the healing work begins to happen. As an activist, I think for many activists, what keeps us going is our ability to be able to look towards the future. I really believe that there is an emerging awakening within the American Jewish community. I've had even some American Jews who come here and they say, we came to Israel and we left from Palestine. For American Jews coming here and listening to us and hearing us and seeing our humanity and understanding that we are not just out sitting in bunkers planning the next attack against Israelis, that we do have a desire to live in peace and to have our freedom and they walk in our streets and they eat in our restaurants and like, I mean, it's crazy that I have to say this, that we are real human beings that just want to survive and live in like all other people in this world. The moment they see this and experience this for themselves, it creates something in them. It shifts something in them. What they do with it when they go back, it becomes their responsibility.
I came home and spoke out. I think initially it was very painful and shocking for a lot of people. I had friends from high school and from college who didn't know how to speak to me at the beginning because these conversations were forbidden for us growing up. I've grown up very much as a product of this mass mobilization across the community to ensure that young people stay engaged in pro-Israel politics. For most people I know who actually took the time to see with their own eyes what was happening, it very quickly challenges everything we've been taught. It's very painful because it is so intimately bound up with the identity of the community. There have always been Jews who have spoken out for Palestinian rights, and more people are willing to take off their blinders, looking at this reality, saying this is intolerable. I continued to meet more and more young people like me who were having similar experiences. And it made me realize that I was part of a bigger story of something that was happening not just to me, but to young people around the country. We decided to bring the crisis of American Jewish support for Israel to the doorsteps of Jewish institutions to force that conversation in public. First of all my friends at AIPAC stopped talking to me. I've lost many childhood friends over this. Also, many friends have come along politically with me over the years. Many in my family have also. Many in my family also deeply disagree with me. Every time I have protested outside of a Jewish communal event of some kind, I have seen a friend, a family friend, a parent of a friend on the other side of the barricade. We're literally talking about parents and children.
Young Jews, they go to the Jewish federations, they go to the Reform movement, they go to their day schools, and they say, you mobilized me to be a soldier for Israel, but I had been completely misled. We are also in a moment when there is the possibility of some kind of alternative.
I see it hundreds of times, over and over again, and those hundreds speak for thousands. And they went to the Jewish camps, and they went to the day schools, and they went to the synagogue Hebrew schools. They're really, really angry at the way they were educated and the way that they were indoctrinated about these issues, and justifiably so.
The indoctrination is so severe, it's almost hard to have a conversation about it. It's heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking. Our community right now has to grapple with our complicity.
And we want to welcome you to the Jewish resistance!
Jewish opinion is split.
Some Jewish groups vocally oppose Israel's military policies.
More than 1,000 Jewish activists descended on Washington, D.C. Sunday to protest AIPAC.
So we tell some of our more conservative brothers and sisters on the inside that you do not represent the best of the Jewish prophetic tradition, and we here to bear witness.
It's a new day now. You got a number of young Jewish brothers and sisters who are undergoing moral and spiritual awakening. They're deeply concerned about the suffering of Palestinians. They come from a people who have been hated, but they don't want to see the cycle of hate perpetrated even by Jews themselves.
Every time I have protested outside of a Jewish communal event of some kind, I have seen a friend, a family friend, a parent of a friend on the other side of the barricade. We're literally talking about parents and children. The indoctrination is so severe, it's almost hard to have a conversation about it. It's heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking. Our community right now has to grapple with our complicity.
It's a new day now. You got a number of young Jewish brothers and sisters who are undergoing moral and spiritual awakening. They're deeply concerned about the suffering of Palestinians. They come from a people who have been hated, but they don't want to see the cycle of hate perpetrated even by Jews themselves.
Israel, it's been part of my life since early childhood. Within the Jewish community, there's been a striking change. And Israel's well aware of it. Human will and commitment can change things.
My name is Talia. This is the first time I am using my full real name to stand in solidarity with Palestinians. And I never thought in my life that I would be standing with this many Jews for Palestine. I'm a rabbi. As long as Palestinian lives are treated as disposable, our house as a people is not in order.
Tomorrow we show up and we march following the leadership of Palestinians. Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free
Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib.
I am the only Palestinian American member of Congress now. How many Palestinians have to die for their lives to matter? Life under apartheid strips Palestinians of their human dignity.
How many more decades do they need to endure this subjugation before there is a shift in this unreasonable status quo?
And what would you recommend?
I would recommend freedom.
The real challenge is trying to keep that moral and spiritual dimension strong. Because anytime you cut against the grain, you're going to catch hell.
Anti-occupation Jews are blocking Damascus Gate. Israeli Jews
I don't think it's as serious as it's made up to be. Okay, they're entitled. That's fine. Okay, I don't think they represent much. I think they're a little super naive. I think that most American Jews, even though they have different views on settlements or occupation, I think that's still a decision at the end of the day they're going to leave for the Israelis to make. As long as Israel is under threat, and as strong as it is, and as dynamic as it is, it's still under threat from its neighbors, and 100,000 missiles. We postpone that philosophical debate to another time.
Palestinians are so dehumanized in the community that it's really hard for people to figure out how to even understand Palestinians' legitimate rights and claims to the land.
Palestinians gathered for protests at the Israeli-Gaza border.
They're demanding the right to return to lands from which they were forced out in 1948.
At least 55 Palestinians died Monday during mass protests. Israeli troops fired on the demonstrators.
أنا إلي 7 جمعة بنيجي واليوم كل جمعة بنيجي هون كتير يا خال واللي استشهد واللي تصاوب.
Look at the more recent Gaza demonstrations. Ask yourself the question, if the Mexicans stood at the border and marched 1 million Mexicans or 20,000 Mexicans, what would America do? You know, first they would try tear gas, and then it would and eventually would have to shoot.
There are a lot of Jewish young people who see a Jewish establishment that is racist, that is nationalistic.
Israel is in the Middle East and not the Midwest. So the neighbors are not necessarily the Jones or the Smiths.
I don't want war, but it's been imposed on us. So we should do right and defeat the terrorists.
We don't want to be a part of that, but we are actually building an alternative. I've been involved in this work for about a decade. I was seen as a face of this young, growing Jewish resistance to the American Jewish establishment. It made perfect sense to me that Bernie would hire someone like me as a Jewish outreach coordinator. Within about 48 hours of being on the campaign, the attacks started rolling in. These old men from the Jewish establishment came out to say, you know, that I was dangerous, that I was a threat. A journalist wrote an article about me. The headline was, "Bernie Sanders' new Jewish outreach coordinator is an outspoken critic of Israeli occupation." The next headline that I found out about when I walked into work was Abe Foxman calls on Sanders to fire new Jewish community liaison for, quote, anti-Israel comments.
On Thursday, the Sanders campaign suspended its new national Jewish outreach coordinator, Simone Zimmerman, 2 days after she was hired.
So as far as I'm aware, this was Abe Foxman's first comment in public since his retirement from the ADL, and he came out of retirement to defend the world from the great threat of Simone Zimmerman.
It hurts me for a Jewish kid to stand up there and say justice for the Palestinians and not saying justice for the Israelis. Troubles me, hurts me, bothers me. It means we failed. We failed in educating and explaining, etc. When we talk about we're losing the kids, we lost them.
Birthright participants staged a protest walkout.
5 of us will be leaving to learn about the occupation from the perspectives of Palestinians and IDF soldiers.
Thank you very much. You cannot be a tyrant on this bus. Get off the bus.
It's just
go to Palestine. Just go. Because guess what? What's going to happen? You're going to get killed, you're going to get raped.
We're seeing that many millennials are becoming disenchanted with Israel. And I take a very different approach on this. I say to them, we need to love Israel even more.
Boycott birthright, that's our plan. No free trips on stolen land. Boycott birthright, that's our plan.
It means that we who are the older generation have much more work to do.
This whole communal obsession with defending Israel has basically warped into seeing someone like me as a threat to the community. The word that I used to hear a lot was self-hating Jew. Like, the only way that a Jewish person could possibly care about the humanity of Palestinians is if you hate yourself. Let's see what I find in here. You are a self-loathing Jew. Go kill yourself. With Jews like you, who needs ignorant, racist, bigot Arabs? You work against our people, you're an anti-Semitic Jew, you've been working for the enemy. Simone Zimmerman, another member of the lunatic, anti-Semitic far left.
There's always been this argument of, oh, you can't criticize Israel. Criticizing Israel feeds anti-Semitism. Criticizing Israel helps the enemies of Israel.
As more and more American Jews are speaking out in support of Palestinian freedom, now they just say instead, we're overt anti-Semites, we hate all Jewish people, or even worse, that we're not Jewish at all.
We are attacked as being not really Jewish if we are not supportive of Israel. And that's where you start seeing just the blanket delegitimization of an entire sector of American Jewish society, focusing on this so-called new anti-Semitism.
And then came the new anti-Semitism, which was the anti-Semitism relating to Israel, what some have said, Israel became the Jew of the nations, in the same way that historically, whatever was permitted for everybody else was not permitted for the Jew. Now, Israel was singled out.
So many of the self-appointed leaders of our community have been trying to equate the idea of supporting Palestinian rights itself with anti-Semitism.
This is about anti-Israel, anti-Semitic attitudes.
Classic new anti-Semitism. The extreme left has a long history of anti-Semitism, of anti-Israel hatred.
How stupid have they been for all these years, voting for Obama and other anti-Semites like him?
Unwillingness to grapple with Palestinian suffering is putting a lot of American Jews in a really dangerous and sad position.
How far will Jewish Americans go in the effort to quash pressure on Israel? How far will people go? It's hard to see how far they won't go if this is where things are today.
At the end of the day, pro-Israel leaders want to be in the room with the people in power. They will do anything to preserve unconditional support for Israel.
Thank you. When I become president, the days of treating Israel like a second-class citizen will end on day one.
History is not going to judge us kindly.
I'd like to say that we were blessed by heaven with Donald Trump being elected President of the United States. We should pray that they should remain in office and that he should continue to do the great things he does on behalf of the United States of America and on behalf of Israel.
We're seeing like a horrifying culmination of what support of Israel at all costs has led to. Disregarding any lesson of history, disregarding any sort of morality.
The great irony of having this be where we are today within the Jewish community is that there actually is resurgent anti-Semitism, the kind that I think my generation and the generations that have come after me never thought we'd see in our lifetimes.
Hail Trump! Hail our people! Hail victory!
In the U.S., a couple of things have been happening, and then we'll go to Trump or Trumpism. It's not a question, is he a bigot? I don't think he's a bigot. I think he is what he is. I don't think he's a racist. I don't think he's an anti-Semite. I think you can call him all kinds of things.
The community has spent so much time attacking anyone who criticizes Israel when they're actual threats to our community. That's led our communal institutions to basically be silent in the face of rising white nationalism.
Jews will not replace us! Jews will not replace us! Jews will not replace us!
The way that we talk about anti-Semitism isn't about protecting Jews, it's about protecting Israel. How dangerous is that at this moment with the rise of anti-Semitism?
And often, when American politicians are asked about anti-Semitism, they talk about their support for Israel. Support for Israel today is actually replacing what it means to be a Jew. These people have basically decided that support for Israel is more important than the safety of Jews. We're not going to say anything about the spreading of these anti-Semitic conspiracy theories.
We have seen a tremendous amount of this use of vile anti-Semitic tropes.
The thread talks about a Jewish plot to enslave people in the United States.
Anti-Semitic flyers steeped in COVID-19 conspiracies, saying every single aspect of the COVID agenda is Jewish.
That's the way the Jews work. They are deceivers. They plot, they lie, they do whatever they have to do.
The gunman told a SWAT officer that he wanted all Jews to die and that they were committing genocide against his people.
It's a profoundly sad moment, and I think it's a tipping moment. These anti-Semitic nightmares that we all, it's all coming to life in front of our eyes. I can't help but think about all the American Jewish organizations that have spent the last decade pouring millions of dollars into smearing and marginalizing human rights advocates, Jewish, Palestinian, and not, trying to brand Palestinian protest as anti-Semitic, when there were neo-Nazis trying to kill us in our synagogues. My parents' and grandparents' generation grew up in a world in which Jews were not safe. They invested so much in the idea that Jews could only be safe through Israel. But our safety and our security is actually bound up in the safety and the security of all people.
The most powerful pro-Israel lobby in the country are now donating money to Republican politicians who either incited or continue to support the rioters who stormed the Capitol on January 6th.
That's part of a politics of solidarity. And it feels totally morally coherent and morally urgent to support freedom and dignity for all people in all the places that we live. Palestinians have already been telling us this for decades.
So guys, here's the world.
But the world is finally coming to catch up.
For me, I would say if anybody has any influence on Israeli policy, and I say this with a big F, it is the American Jewish community. The American Jewish community have the potential to have the greatest influence in shifting our reality outside of this land. For many people around the world, when they see the voice of the Jewish community rise and protest against this occupation, it will allow other voices to say, yes, we could also have a voice in it as well. Now we're doing joint work in trying to end this occupation and bringing peace and justice into this land.
The most inspiring experiences I had are with Jewish Americans that come in and take a stand.
We're going to hear tonight a number of personal stories. At some point, you guys decided to, quote unquote, break the silence. And I'm interested, was there a particular moment that led you to this?
In 2008, I joined the military. In America, we have this concept of innocent until proven guilty. There is no innocent Palestinian, according to the army.
That's so not true.
In occupied territory.
Quiet down, please. Get out of here. I mean, come on, you're lying. That's a lie. She said there's no... It's not a lie.
What we're talking about is not giving Palestinians the right that we of Israelis have. And that's apartheid. To go against the grain is not an easy thing to do.
So I did not speak about my experiences in the occupation publicly until very recently. I was afraid that I would be demonized. I've seen friends of mine be demonized for speaking out about the same things. The first time I ever spoke publicly about my experiences, I cried the whole time that I was speaking. It's gotten a little bit easier to talk about since then because I have taken the time to process it, but that doesn't mean it's easy anytime I talk about these experiences. But we can't wait any longer.
I've been longing for this Jewish conversation for 17 years. We're here today to talk about some things that are often can feel impossible in the Jewish community. These conversations can happen. We are not risking our Jewish history. You are not closing a door to the rest of your Jewish life. All that we have to risk is our denial.
I can start. My high school had an Israel studies class all about when you get to college and people start telling you about Israel being an apartheid state, this is how you respond.
From my summer camp and my youth movement, one of the core tenets of it was the Jewish state needed to be built, and just no questioning of what price we were really willing to pay, or willing to make Palestinians pay.
As an Israeli, the Palestinian identity itself is not something I had to learn that it exists.
Right.
So slowly, as I came to learn that the occupation exists, I started learning that there is another narrative.
We're here to talk about the history that's often referred to as the Nakba. 750,000 people displaced from their homes. At least 400 villages undone in their entirety. The colonization is also ongoing. The ongoing Nakba, the continued, not just the historical, but the continued ethnic cleansing of Palestinians.
I have been blessed to witness the ways that Palestinian society continue to find ways to thrive, but we can't deny that there has been catastrophe and that it's been catastrophic, the scale of loss. We're really here to teach each other, but I think nothing's as important as action because we are talking about ongoing displacement. People might tell you that if you stand up for Palestinian rights, that you aren't really Jewish, that you're maybe a self-hating Jew. As a rabbi, what I see when I look at the work of solidarity is a long chain of Jewish history. This chain of people, of ancestors and texts and traditions that are about justice and fighting for it. Jewish tradition tells us to envision a world where all people are safe and free, to never stop fighting for that world. So may you all feel blessed in a tradition of liberation, and may you be blessed to know you're not alone, and let's get to work.